we talk about a lot of different issues on these streams, but we are guided by a perspective. And so tonight, I want to go over this perspective, and that we call this perspective innovationism. That's what we call it. And there are a number of people who mischaracterize it. And there are two misinterpretations of innovationism and the Center for Political Innovation in our movement. And the first misinterpretation is that this is just same old communism dressed up. You just gave communism a new name. You got chicken. You got terrified of being called a communist, and so you gave it a new name. And that's not what we're doing. And the other interpretation is the exact opposite. You abandoned communism. You abandoned everything you stood for. You sold out, and you became an anti-communist, a supporter of imperialism, and that's what's happened. And neither of those things are true. We have done neither of those things. We have not just taken communism and dressed it up in a new name. We haven't done that. On the other hand, we haven't backed away from our principles, from the principles upon which Center for Political Innovation was founded. We hold true to those principles stronger than ever before, but we realize that we're in a new stage, and those principles have taken on a new meaning, and that words change when reality changes. When an acorn stops being an acorn and turns into an oak tree, you can't call it an acorn anymore. It may have come from an acorn, but it's now an oak tree. When a baby is born, you can't call it a fetus any longer. And when it starts walking, you can't call it an infant any longer. And when it grows a beard, you can't call it a child any longer. Things change. And when things change, some things continue and some things go in a different direction. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. All right, we have one, we are not just taking the same old communism and dressing it up under a new name. We're not doing that. And number two, we have not abandoned our principles. We are preserving our principles. We are preserving the essence of what we have always believed by breaking with some very, very bad things and pivoting in a new direction. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And I've talked about this many times on these streams, but we're going to talk about it again. Because on the one hand, if we were just doing the same old communism and giving it a new name, that would be stupid. And secondly, if we were to abandon everything we've stood for over the years and made great sacrifices for over the years, that would be stupid as well. And we've done neither of those things. Neither of those things have we done. We are still the anti-imperialists of America. No one in America, except for maybe the Uhuru movement, there's a couple other people, but other than us, there are very, very few people that have done anywhere near the anti-imperialist activism that we have done. And I'm not talking about podcasts. I'm not talking about people on the internet arguing. When it comes to actually spreading the message of anti-imperialism, our organization is miles ahead of the pack. We had a National Day of Action on August 15th and 16th where we were in 8 different cities speaking up for peace with Russia. We brought the message of peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula all through the 2024 election cycle. We went to Trump's inauguration and handed out thousands of booklets about peace and imperialism, a new day for America, urging peace and, et cetera, at Trump's inauguration. We were featured in New Yorker magazine for our big banner. We spoke directly with President Putin about the Uhuru case. We were just at the World Youth Festival and at the Intervision Song Competition. Our comrade Noah wrote a beautiful article about the Intervision Song Competition that we just were the only Americans at in Russia. Russia was kicked out of the Eurovision Song Competition. They had their own song competition called Intervision. We were in the crowd. We were there. Our member Noah was at Intervision as the American at the Intervision Song Competition. The American performers pulled out under pressure, but Noah was there along with Cynthia McKinney, the congresswoman, along with George Galloway. we are the anti-imperialists. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I could go over all of the work that we've done. So don't think for a minute we've abandoned what we've stood for. We have not. But we also haven't just dressed up Soviet-style Marxism, Leninism in new clothes. We haven't done that either. We have pivoted in a new direction. A year ago, we launched the Innovationist turn. And we officially decided to not present ourselves as and associate with the communist movement. We decided to not be communists any longer. And tonight I am going to explain what that means. We took the good from communism and we left the bad. And we have built a new movement. We're building a new movement because we have no choice. A number of circumstances have made that abundantly clear. So I am going to go over a lot of history tonight to explain to you how we got where we are. So first of all, this is really important, is that capitalism has gone through 4 stages. We are in the 4th stage of the capitalist system. Now, right here, you get a lot of confusion because people think capitalism is just capitalism, right? What does capitalism even mean? A lot of people don't know what it means. People think capitalism means having money. Well, there was money in the Roman Empire. There was money in feudalism. There's been money in many societies, right? Money existed before capitalism. And if you go to countries that have socialist planned economies, they also have currency. They have money. So capitalism isn't having money. Capitalism is an economic system in which the major centers of economic power are privately owned and operated in order to maximize profit for their owners. And capitalism emerged as a great advance in history. It was a great thing when it emerged. It was a great advance over feudalism. Just like feudalism was a great advance over slavery. And slavery was a great advance over hunter-gatherer civilization. Human beings are constantly reinventing our relationship with nature and moving to a higher mode of production. Right? First, we were hunter-gatherers. Then we developed the slavery mode of production based on agriculture. And then from there, we developed feudalism. And then from there, we got capitalism. No other species is like human beings. Right? Human beings are innovative creatures. I believe that God is the creator of all things. And human beings are endowed with a certain godlike creative power, the ability to interact with their environment and master their environment, to force the environment to serve them. No other species can do that. All other species, as Frederick Engels said in his very famous essay on the role of labor in the transition from ape to man, he said, all other species simply interact with their environment. Man masters the environment and forces it to serve him. And it is through labor that man does it. Labor power is how we master our environment. And the entire history of human civilization, for the last 8,000 years, we've been gradually reinventing the way we master our environment to be more and more efficient, to increase our population, to increase our life expectancy, to increase the comfort of our life. Human beings are very, very much an innovative species that is constantly reinventing its relationship with nature and moving toward a higher plane. So capitalism has gone through 4 stages. The first stage of capitalism was called primitive accumulation. Primitive accumulation was when wealth was seized on a mass scale in order to lay the basis for the Western countries of the world to move toward the capitalist mode of production. Primitive accumulation was a very, very ugly process. It started out in the Western countries. In Britain, primitive accumulation was throwing the poor people, the peasants, off their land. The peasants had lived in the feudal commons for hundreds of years. And all of a sudden, they got kicked out. And they told this is private property, breaking apart the feudal commons, the enclosure movement. And there was the genocide in the Scottish Highlands that followed the Jacobite uprising. After Bonnie Prince Charlie was defeated and fled to the Isle of Skye, there was a genocide of the Scottish Highlanders, and the capitalist system emerged Scotland was transformed into capital. And there was land seizures in Northern Ireland. And it obviously wasn't just on the island of Britain. There was also the seizure of the Americas from the native people. And the native people were slaughtered in mass and killed. And the land of the United States and the land on the African continent was turned into private property. There was the transatlantic slave trade, where millions of people were killed in the process of bringing them to the United States to work as slave laborers. The process of creating capitalism was genocidal. The wealth of the world that laid the basis for the Western system was created with mass theft and murder on a scale that humanity had never seen before. Yes, there had been ugly wars before, there had been colonizers, etc., but the primitive accumulation that laid the basis for the Western system, right, that was something that humanity had not seen before. And you could not have had the West emerge to be powerful without this mass theft that started out in the Western countries themselves, the genocide of the native people, or the genocide first of the peasantry, driving them off their lands, privatizing the feudal commons. And then from there, seizing territory and colonialism, all of this, right? And that's the primitive accumulation. That was the first phase. Out of primitive accumulation, you got industrialization, and you got the industrial system. And the industrial system is the system where you have the employer who owns the factory, and you have the wage worker who's hired to work in it. And the industrial system was different than slavery because the factory owner doesn't own the people who work in the factory. They work there of their own free will. And on top of that, they're not peasants. They don't have a little tract of land and they get to keep some of the and what they grow. And no, they're not peasants. They're not serfs. They're wage workers. They show up every day at the factory. They rent themselves out to the factory owner. And it is a relationship that exists between wage worker and wage owner, and owner, right? And that system of industrialization, the industrial stage of capitalism, brought about a problem that had never existed before in history. Always in history, whenever there was poverty, it was caused by scarcity. That makes sense. If you don't have enough of something, there's a shortage, right? People go hungry when there's not enough food. People are homeless when there's not enough housing. But in the stage of industrial capitalism, first in 1825, and then every decade after that, like a cycle, you had an economic crisis, a breakdown of the economy that was not rooted in scarcity. It was rooted in abundance. People started becoming hungry because there was too much food. People became homeless because there were too many houses. So much wealth was produced, and as a result, all kinds of people became homeless and unemployed and desperate and poor. That doesn't make any sense. Never before in history has abundance created poverty. But the reason that abundance created poverty was because of the fact that the capitalist mode of production is based on profit, and that there is a built-in problem with production organized for profit, which is the wages paid out in the process of production are never enough to buy back the product that is produced. There's always more product created than there is wages paid out. And I will explain this. I have this video, Socialist Math, and I've explained this many times, but this is a built-in problem, the problem of glut, G-L-U-T, glut, the problem of overproduction. Here we go. 101 about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. Do you know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America. So I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I'm going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
We very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product right? If you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledge. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system. Now, that's really, really important. It's extremely important. And that's something I talk about night after night on these streams, because the fact that we have an economic system where, in order to prevent farms from going out of business, our government buys billions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave just to keep the price of dairy high enough that farms don't go out of business. The fact that our government has to spend billions and billions of dollars on weaponry just to keep the economy rolling along. That we produce a huge amount of wealth, and the more we produce wealth, the poorer people get, and the more efficient it becomes to produce wealth, the more unstable our economy gets, right? This is something that is really, really important to acknowledge, right? That the market becomes glutted with products that cannot be sold. The worker cannot buy back the product he produces. The capitalist is constantly trying to make production more and more efficient by reducing the role of the worker. As a result, this problem of having to churn out more products than the worker can buy is constantly getting worse the more technology advances. This problem, this is something that was around. People acknowledge this even before Marx, right? The problem of poverty amid plenty, poverty created by abundance, the problem of an economic system where the more efficient production gets, the poorer people get. The more unstable things get. This problem defines the period of industrialization. The depressions, the economic panics, etc. All of this is something that the period of industrial capitalism had that had never existed before in history. So what happened as a result? Right, this is a quote from Cecil Rhodes. Now, have you ever heard of Cecil Rhodes? Well, if you ever heard of the Rhodes Scholar Program, that's Cecil Rhodes' estate, right? He was a millionaire, multimillionaire, billionaire from Britain, and he was a colonizer of Africa. Have you ever heard of Zimbabwe? What was Zimbabwe called before it was called Zimbabwe? It was called Rhodesia because he colonized it, right? Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer, the guy who set up the Rhodes Scholar Program, the guy who set up Rhodesia, the apartheid colony that existed before modern Zimbabwe. Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes, this is what he was quoted as saying in 1895. I was in the East End of London, a working class quarter, yesterday, and I attended a meeting of the unemployed. And I listened to their wild speeches, which were just a cry for bread, bread. And on my way home, I pondered over the scene, and I became more than ever convinced of the importance of imperialism. My cherished idea is a solution for the social problem. In order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population. That's all the unemployed people, right? The surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. That's all these extra products that they're creating that cannot be purchased by the workers at home. We'll go to Africa and make the people in Africa buy them from us. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become imperialists. And this problem within the industrial phase of capitalism, that the worker can never buy back what he produces, that they constantly need a new market for their products, that they constantly are eliminating workers from the assembly line, that is what drove the British to create an empire. And they went to India and they burned all the looms of India, and they forced the people of India to import their cloth from Britain, right? What is that? That's the new markets for the goods produced, right? And imperialism is holding back economic development. It is keeping countries from developing their own industries. It is keeping countries as captive markets. It's going to a country and dominating their economy, right? And the founders of our country, they called it the English system. Henry Charles Carey wrote about the English system. And Vladimir Lenin eventually called it imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And on top of that, you even have in Russia now they talk about Atlanticism and the Atlanticist order. It is an economic system whereby, what do? You acquire new lands to settle the surplus population, and you seize new markets for the goods produced in your factories and mines. And it was a way to prevent a revolution, because in Britain and in America and in France and Germany, as a result of this crisis of overproduction, people are getting poorer and more unemployed, and that as technology is advancing, fewer people are hired. And in order to prevent a civil war, they had to move to a higher stage. They had to go seize parts of the world. And imperialism flowed out of the built-in problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profit, overproduction, glut. Out of that built-in problem, the value crisis, that's the term Peter Coffin thought of, value crisis. Out of that, you got a new stage called imperialism. Imperialism is a stage of the capitalist system that is defined by preventing countries from developing their own industries, seizing them as captive markets, and holding them in poverty. It's the export of capital. In the past, countries exported products. They export tires on the international market. They might export oil on the international market. But imperialism was the export of capital, where the corporations themselves are being spread all over the world. And a defining aspect of imperialism was the dominance of bankers. Bankers became dominant over industrialists. In the era of industrial capitalism, it was factory owners, right? Carnegie, he was a steel owner, right? The DuPonts and the Mellons, and they owned production. But the titans of industry, the captains of industry, were overcome by bankers who owned houses of finance. Bankers. And every major religion in history, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, forbids the lending of money at interest, because money created by lending money doesn't create any value in the process, right? You just have, you get money by having money, right? You have money and you lend it and they pay back interest. Now you have more money, and no, you didn't create any value. It is money created without value. It's called fictitious capital. Money that goes up without society getting wealthier. The banker gets wealthier as society gets poorer. In fact, the poorer people get, the more they're going to have to turn to the banker to bail them out. They're going to get more in debt to the banker. And imperialism brings with it a new dynamic where you have a layer of the ultra-rich in Wall Street and in London who their economic interest is intrinsically tied with keeping the world poor, preventing countries from developing their own industries, preventing countries from rising up from poverty, keeping people in debt, keeping people impoverished. That is what is fundamentally different between industrialization and imperialism. They're two different stages. And people don't seem to understand this. This is what is lost on a lot of people. Imperialism and capitalism, regular industrial capitalism and imperialism, are completely different. They're completely different. And in the era of industrial capitalism, the contradiction in the world was between the factory worker and the factory owner. But imperialism changed that. The contradiction in the world was no longer between the factory worker and the factory owner. It was between the impoverished, colonized nation and the imperialist system. It was completely different. Just like primitive accumulation was different than industrial capitalism, imperialism was a new stage. And this is what people don't understand. If you're still talking about, the pencil factory where some people, one guy owns it and gets the profits and he hires the other people, you're stuck in the 1800s. It's not about that anymore. It's about the imperialists, the big monopolies that go to big corners of the world and keep the entire nation in poverty. And if you don't understand that, if you don't understand we're not dealing with the factory worker versus the factory owner, we're dealing with the big monopolies, the bankers, the fictitious capital, the financiers, the globalists going around the world and seizing parts of the world and keeping them impoverished, holding back development. If you don't understand that, you're late to the game. And imperialism completely threw the Marxist movement into crisis. And this is, again, what people don't understand. What Marx thought that the communist revolution would happen in Germany, and it would happen in Britain, and it would happen in France. That's where they thought it would happen, because those were the most advanced countries. And he said, oh, they're the most advanced capitalist countries. And that's not what happened. And around 1900, they had what was called the crisis of Marxism, because what Karl Marx had predicted was not happening. He said that the conditions in America and Britain and France and Germany would just get so much worse that the people there would have no choice but to overthrow the system. That's not what happened. In fact, things got more and more stable in Germany and Britain and France and America. And the lives of a lot of the workers in America and Britain and France and Germany got better. Not all of them, but a lot of the workers in the Western countries saw their living standards increase. And to a lot of people, it looked like what Marx wrote was completely wrong. And if you're still stuck in, well, it's Caleb, it's the worker, it's the factory worker versus the factory owner, if you're still doing that, you're way behind, because in 1900, it was very clear that that's not what it was about. And there was one Marxist in Russia, a guy named Lenin, who developed an understanding of why it was that what Marx was saying was not true. And he developed his understanding of imperialism, the monopolistic stage of capitalism. And he came up with the understanding that capitalism has entered this new stage of imperialism. And in this new stage, the fight is not between the factory worker and the factory owner. It's between the oppressed and colonized nation and the imperialist monopolies. It's the struggle of nations to be free. And he created a completely new movement. Bolshevism was a completely different movement. And it developed the theory of imperialism, and it developed the theory of national liberation, the idea that whole nations could break out of the domination of the imperialists. It was a completely new movement. And part of Bolshevism was the understanding that national capitalists, the national bourgeoisie, can be allies in the struggle against imperialism. That Dr. Sun Yat-sen was a capitalist, but he was trying to free China from the British Empire, so they supported him. That the Emir of Afghanistan was a monarchist, a conservative monarchist, but he was against the British Empire, so they supported him. The merchants of Egypt, they were capitalists, but they were fighting the British Empire, so they had to be supported. That capitalism is not always bad. Capitalists can be part of the struggle against imperialism. That's a big part of Leninism, that it's not factory worker versus factory owner. And that people that are still doing the communism thing, they're behind. They're way behind. They go around, oh, that person's a capitalist. They're a bad person. They're exploiting labor. What are you talking about? The Emir of Afghanistan was exploiting labor. The Egyptian merchants were exploiting labor. Dr. Sun Yat-sen was exploiting labor, right? You think all the factory owners in China, the private companies in China, you think they're not exploiting labor? right? I mean, there's all. I mean, they have no idea what they're talking about. They make it sound like it's a moral question, right? It's wrong to own a business and exploit labor. That they have no understanding of what any of this is about. And what Bolshevism was, what the world came to know as Marxism-Leninism, was a completely new movement that emphasized national liberation and the creation of a socialist economy as a way of uplifting the entire nation. That's what Leninism is, and that there's no understanding of this. I will show you. This is the Chinese flag. And I'm just going to put it on the screen because I'm just so I continue to have to deal with people that don't understand these facts, right? All right, we're going to put the Chinese flag on the screen. Right? What do the stars on the Chinese flag stand for? What do the stars on the Chinese flag stand for? What do they stand for? Let's get it on the screen here. Sorry, just trying to pull up the Chinese flag. Hold on, just trying to get a Chinese flag on the screen here. Oh my goodness, my computer is being uncooperative. Hold on. All right, now we should be able to put the Chinese flag on the screen. What do the stars on the Chinese flag stand for? Well, the big star, that stands for the Communist Party of China. Now, what do the little stars stand for? They stand for the block of 4 classes. The block of 4 classes. The peasants, the proletariat, the petty bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie. The farm laborer peasants who, don't own their land but rent it from a landowner, the factory workers, the small business owners, the merchants, and the wealthy nationalist capitalists who are in opposition to the Western imperialists. The block of 4 classes. The block of 4 classes. Now, if you're still saying, "Oh, we're against capitalists," well, two of those stars stand for capitalists. 2 of those stars stand for capitalists. Petty bourgeoisie, those are capitalists. National bourgeoisie, those are capitalists. And the Chinese Communist Party leads the capitalists in the struggle against imperialism, in the struggle to build up China, in the struggle for national liberation. This is, again, and if you're still talking about, oh, workers and capitalists, you're missing, this flag shouldn't make any sense to you then. Right? And I have to hammer these points home because people don't understand this. Out of imperialism, out of industrialization came the imperialist system. Leninism and Bolshevism said the struggle was against imperialism. Capitalism had entered its monopolistic stage of imperialism. And what did imperialism create? A nightmare called World War I. In World War I, 20 million people died. And it was a fight between the German and Austrian capitalists and the American and British and French capitalists. And they were fighting over Africa and Asia and Latin America and who got what chunk of the world. And the borders of the Middle East were drawn up in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The countries that won World War I, they drew the borders. If you look at the Middle East, you see Iraq, you see Syria, Saudi Arabia, you see Jordan, you see Kuwait. Who drew those borders? The French and the British and the Americans drew those borders with the Sykes-Picot Agreement. because that's what World War I was about. It was about who gets to run the third world. The borders of the modern Middle East were drawn up in a treaty called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And that's what World War I was about. And World War I was an episode of mass death and killing that the world had never seen before. And yes, that's why they don't make any sense. It was about which colonizer got what country. The Sykes-Picot Agreement. And World War I, they used poison gas. They used airplane bombers. There was widespread use of machine guns. 20 million people died. And there was a socialist in Germany named Rosa Luxemburg, and this is what she said. This war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. At first, this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war, but then, when the period of unlimited wars begins, it progresses toward its inevitable consequences. The triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery. That out of imperialism, we started to see the very, very beginnings with World War I and then with World War II. We started to see the very beginnings of the stage that we're living in now, destructive accumulation. Where imperialism, the way imperialism works is that they go around the world seizing parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America as a way to stabilize the homeland. In America, we get cars and TV sets and radios and a nice, comfortable life, at least for the white people. And the countries in the developing world, they're impoverished, but you have stability at home. But as capitalism proceeds, it gets to the point where you have to have war all the time, because this problem of technology creating poverty, abundance creating poverty, continues to get worse. And the role of the industrial worker at the assembly line goes away and is vanished. And gradually it gets to the point that you have to have war all the time just to keep the system going along. War becomes a constant necessity. And what they used to do only to the people in the colonized world, they start doing in the homeland. They start destroying the economy of the homeland. And if you look at the Western countries, it used to be that Britain, France, America, we went around the world impoverishing countries and got stability at home. Now we're becoming less and less stable at home. This is what needs to be understood, that we're in this fourth stage of destructive accumulation. Destructive accumulation, where barbarism is becoming a reality. And we're moving toward the end of civilization, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery. The system is eating itself from within. Right? And that's the stage that we are living in. And let's be clear about a few things, right? In the period of industrialization, the movement that was created was a movement of labor unions among factory workers. The International Working Men's Association, the Social Democratic parties. But in the era that imperialism became ascendant, what kind of movements were created? Did Mao go around building labor unions? There were labor unions, but they largely built a movement of peasants and other people to build a new China, a movement for national liberation. And in Vietnam, did Ho Chi Minh go around building labor unions? I'm sure he did at some point in his life, but he built the National Liberation Front of Vietnam. And that in the era of imperialism, the way you organized was very different than how you organized in the period of industrialization. The period of industrialization, you organized the workers in your factory to fight the employer. But in the period of imperialism, you organized the nation against the imperialist. Well, we're now in a new stage, the stage of destructive accumulation. And in this new stage, it requires a new form of organization. And I will explain to you. The movement of opposition has changed. Marxism is considered a left ideology. Where does left come from? Where does the term left come from? It comes from the French Revolution. In France, they overthrew the king, they cut his head off, and the people that were loyal to the king, they sat on the right side of the National Assembly. And the people that were supporting the revolution, they sat on the left side, the Jacobins. And so they were the left. And leftism was a movement across Europe. It started out, they wore red caps. And eventually the red caps were replaced with a red flag. Red was the flag of blood. Red was the flag of vengeance. Red was the flag of sexual passion. And it was people unleashing their rage at society, unleashing their rage at their oppressors, and embracing the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, fighting to build a new world based on the rights of man and justice. Marxism started out among the left. The left already existed. Marxism was one form of leftism. Because the French Revolution did not create an egalitarian society, because there was all kinds of injustice, there were all kinds of intellectuals who were inspired by the French Revolution who started getting together and talking about what went wrong. Why did we not get the liberté, égalité, fraternité we'd been promised? Why did we not, have the society that we aimed to create? What was it? And Marx was a left Hegelian. He was a follower of Hegel, the philosopher, and he came up with a theory of history called dialectical materialism to explain why it was that they couldn't just create an egalitarian society in the aftermath of the overthrow of feudalism, and discovering that capitalism was a new stage, that history was marching forward. That's where Marxism comes from. And Marxism was the ideology that built labor unions. It was the ideology that built the labor movement. In Britain, there was the Chartist movement that eventually led to the International Working Men's Association. And you had, in America, the Socialist Party and the American Federation of Labor. And social democracy is the political movement that comes out of Marxism. The Second International, the British Labor Party, the Democratic Socialists of America, the French Socialist Party, the German Social Democratic Party. This movement of labor unions and a political party that supports labor unions, that's what Marxism created. And when imperialism emerged, Marxism was bankrupt. There was the crisis of Marxism. And within the crisis of Marxism, you got Bolshevism. And Bolshevism was this weird, deviant interpretation of Marxism. It said, actually, we're in this whole new stage called imperialism, and actually it's the struggle of nations and national liberation. And actually some capitalists, like the Emir of Afghanistan or the Egyptian merchants or Dr. Sun Yat-sen, some capitalists are good, and we're just trying to defeat imperialism. Bolshevism was this weird spin-off of Marxism that said, oh, we're in a completely new ballgame now, and that means we have to form a completely different type of movement. And the Bolsheviks were obviously defensive. And they said, well, we're the true interpreters. We are the true interpreters of what of what Marx preached. But as much as they were the true interpreters of what Marx preached, they broke with a lot of Marx too. Marx said there are no nations, and largely rejected nationalism of any kind. Now, in the final years of his life, he started embracing the Irish nationalist movement, the Polish nationalist movement, but largely Marx said workers of the world unite. He rejected nationalism. Lenin said nationalism is good, and in fact, it will be struggles of national liberation that will bring socialism into the world. Marx said that the revolution will happen in Germany. Lenin says that revolution is going to happen in the colonized nations. Marx wanted to build highly democratic organizations with all kinds of participation. Lenin wants to build a party of new type, a very disciplined, clandestine, secret society, reserved only for those who give the whole of their lives to the struggle. if you think that Lenin was just doing the same thing that Marx did, you're deluding yourself. He changed it completely. He said, look, we're not living in industrialization anymore. We're living in imperialism. And because we're living in imperialism, we can support nationalism. And because we're living in imperialism, we need to form this new type of organization. And he made a completely new movement based on new circumstances. And in Lenin's day, there were people that were doing what Marx was doing. And those people were called the British Labour Party, and they were called the German Social Democratic Party. They were Karl Kautsky. They were Edward Bernstein. And those people were left behind. Bolshevism was a completely new stage. And if you don't understand that, and people don't understand this, but if you don't understand this, you're missing a big piece. And Lenin changed everything. Everything changed with Bolshevism. The organizational form changed. They formed vanguard parties, democratic centralist organizations. The orientation changed. They're not struggling just against capitalism. They're struggling against imperialism. And they support capitalists as allies against imperialism. Everything changed. Everything changed. And as a result of Bolshevism, this new movement, 1/5 of the planet broke out of capitalism. During the nightmare of World War I, there was one section of the world where the people said, we don't want to fight in World War I any longer. And there was a revolutionary crisis that brought down the Tsar, and it eventually brought the Bolsheviks into power, and they created the Soviet Union. And as soon as they were created, they had a conference, the Congress of the Peoples of the East, and they said, we will support anyone who was struggling against imperialism. And then, after Lenin died, Stalin came into power, and Stalin presided over rapidly industrializing the Soviet Union. This was a backward country, an agrarian, impoverished country. But in a few short years, it became an industrial superpower. And everyone who overlooks this is completely missing a lot. They don't understand what happened in the 20th century. Stalin defined the 20th century because he took Russia, which was an impoverished agrarian country, and made it the country with the largest steel industry in the world, the largest power plant in the world, the Dnieper Dam in Ukraine, a modern oil industry. No country made more tractors. They wiped out illiteracy. What the Soviet Union did from 1928 until World War II was astounding. It had never been done anywhere. A country developed and became a modern industrial country without imperialism. The Soviet Union didn't have to colonize anybody. They didn't have to take over anybody. They didn't have to take anybody into chains. They didn't have to go and seize chunks. No, in the Soviet Union, within their own borders, they mobilized the people. They had a planned economy, socialism in one country, and they made their country a strong powerhouse. And the whole world was astounded by the economic successes of what they did. I have shown this clip before, and I will show it again. Here we go.
To produce engineers and technicians for the new society, training was expanded. And the communists said women should have equality with men, with equal pay. Ella Shistya was one of a new generation of women.
Когда Ленин сказал, стране нужна электрификация, а коммунизм это советская...
When Lenin said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification, I decided that I should become an electrical engineer, that was my holy duty. And I didn't want to just draw up plans, I wanted to build an electric power station. That was my mission, and I achieved it.
Она давала мне...
The revolution gave me the right to feel equal to any man. It gave me the right to work, to study what I wanted to study.
Она давала мне право трудиться, учиться так, как я хочу.
Fyodorova was held up as an example to others.
We live so well. Our hearts are so joyful. In no other country are there such happy young people as us. We're the happiest young people. And on behalf of all young people, I want to thank our party and our dear comrade Stalin for this joy that we have. Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How was it possible, at one of the most difficult times, to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol. Because for us, Stalin was an idol.
Teams of young activists were sent to the country.
We went from house to house in search of illiterate people. We made a note of their names. We then found suitable rooms to hold classes in.
Learning to write would open new doors for those trapped at the bottom of society. One woman who couldn't attend classes because of her child at home was helped by Anastasia Denisova.
Я сказала, что вот тебе учебник, вот будешь заниматься.
I said, here's a textbook for you. I'll come to you so you can learn to read at home. I remember vividly that when the baby cried, she carried on writing with one hand while she rocked him with the other. She was so keen to study. I'll always remember her striving for knowledge and enlightenment. It was immense.
Просто-напросто была огромная.
For Valentina Mikova and Mikhail Arkhipov, these were the most fulfilling days of their lives.
На строительстве домен был один экскаватор. И то плохой.
There was one excavator at the blast furnace building site, and it wasn't always reliable. So we dug all the foundations by hand.
Понимаете, копошатся люди.
The trench would be teeming with people. One takes the earth, throws it to the level above. The second person throws it to the third to the fourth, up to 5 or 6 levels. That was how we got the earth out of the trench. Then it was taken away in wheelbarrows.
Yeah. Again, right? All of this happened, and the Soviet Union became a superpower. China had a revolution. All kinds of countries around the world broke out of imperialism. And they didn't always do it with communists, right? In Iraq and Syria, they did it with Ba'athist Arab socialism, a unique Arab form of socialism. In some country, in Ghana, you had African socialism with Kwame and Nkrumah. Iran had the Islamic Revolution of Iran, not capitalism, but Islam. All over the world, because of the Soviet Union, in the era of imperialism, you had nations break out of the domination of imperialism. And whether they were led by communists or not, they all had to basically build a socialist economy. Because if your economy is dominated by Western corporations, you're not breaking out of imperialism, now are you? And some of these countries tried to have the middle of the way, but they ended up having to adopt a planned economy. What is the difference between the system that came into existence, the Soviet model, and the Western system? Profits are not in command. The reason we have this problem of overproduction is because of the problem of profits in command. Production is organized for profit. But when these countries break out of imperialist domination and they start building themselves up, they don't have profits in command anymore. They have a centrally planned economy and they build themselves up. Now, out of Bolshevism emerged the system of really existing socialism. Really existing socialism was the Soviet model. where you have state-run industries, you have 5-year economic plans, you have Stakhanovism, where those who work the hardest get rewarded. That's called really existing socialism. In the 1960s and 70s and in the 80s, we saw that really existing socialism had big problems. The problem was not building power plants. They were very good at that. The problem was not paving roads. They were very good at that. The problem was not providing health care. They were very good at that. The problem was not wiping out illiteracy. They were very good at that. The problem was with consumer goods. Once you've paved the roads, once you've built the power plants, once you've wiped out illiteracy and built a modern education system, after that, people want fun stuff. They want to, drink Coca-Cola. They want to watch fun stuff on television. They want to, they want their children to have nice little toys to play with. And a completely state-run economy is not very good at those things. It's very good at heavy industry. It's very good at the basics, like laying the foundation. But after that, things stagnate. And the Soviet Union needed to adjust, but they were unable to do so. But China was able to do so. China developed socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is a system where the government plans the economy. However, private companies are able to fill in the gaps and provide services and build nice hotels and restaurants and invent new computer programs. And with a revolutionary government that comes out of an anti-colonial struggle, leading the economy and controlling the economy, they then encourage capitalists to start their own businesses as part of the overall vision. Again, right? If we're still stuck in industrialization, well, capitalists are bad. No. One of the main things that the Chinese Communist Party does is go around finding capitalists and encouraging capitalists and helping capitalists set up companies to make profits as part of the overall planned economy. And in Vietnam, they have the socialist-oriented market economy. It's the same thing. And in Venezuela and in Nicaragua and in Cuba even today, and in socialist countries, they've adopted this new way of doing things. It's called 21st century socialism, where you have a layer of capitalists who are loyal to the homeland and are controlled by the revolutionary government and carry out their market activities as part of an overall plan to make the country stronger. This is called 21st century socialism, right? It's where you have a planned economy, you have an anti-colonial government that's working to carry out and raise the people of the nation up, and you use the market and you facilitate and you create a market to help facilitate that, right? You use the strength of capitalism to advance your planned economy, to advance the entire nation, right? And this is the 5-year plan song from China, right? I will put this on. It's a great song. I've played it on here before, and but we'll put it on, right? Right. We have the song, right? Right. I'll put it on again, right? If you want to understand what's going on, you're way behind if you're just talking about workers and bosses. But yeah, let me see if I can find the. Yeah, here we go. The 13th. This is the 13th 5-year plan song.
Hey, have you guys heard what's going on in China?
President Xi Jinping's new style?
Yes, and there's more.
The Shisanu. The what?
China's 13th 5-year plan. Yeah, the Shisanu.
Oh.
Every 5 years in China, man, they make a new development plan. The time has come for number 13. Shisanu, that's what it means.
It's a huge deal. Like how huge?
Huge.
Like China huge?
Yeah, China huge.
Oh, that's really big.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisanu what?
The Shisanu.
But who makes all the plans?
There's government ministers and think tank minds and party leadership contributing fines. There's doctors, bankers, and farmers too, and even engineers who deal with poo.
Ew, did I hear that right?
Yeah, it's true. Chorus.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, let's pay attention to the Shisanu. Shisanu. Shisanu.
Shisan what?
Shisanu.
But how do they make all the plans?
First there's research views collected, then discussion and views projected. Reports get written and passed around. Then there's actually more research and more discussion and more research and more discussion. Like at every level. Over and over, like through hundreds of rounds. It's
Okay, we got it. Hundreds of rounds. Oh my god.
crazy, right?
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, best pay attention to the Shisanu. Shisanu. Shisanu.
The Shisan what?
Shisanu.
But it's not over yet. When the plan comes out, the work's not done. In fact, it's really just begun. Because every province, county, city, too, have got to figure out what they're gonna do. Whoa.
That's a lot to do.
I know.
Hey, what's it called again?
The Shisanu.
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, best pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu.
The Shisan what?
The Shisanu.
Then the plans keep getting even better. As the plan goes down from high to low, the government's experience continues to grow. They have to work hard and deliberate, because a billion lives are all at stake.
Like every 赵钱孙李周吴郑王冯钱楚魏蒋沈
Chorus!
If you wanna know what China's gonna do, best pay attention to the Shisanu. The Shisanu. The Shisanu. Everybody's talking about the Shisanu.
So that's it.
That's it?
Yeah, now it's time to get ready for the 14th five-year plan.
What?
Yeah, the Shisu.
The Shisu what?
Yeah. They have lots of huge corporations and lots of capitalists in China, but they have a government that controls the economy and ensures growth, and profits are not in command. And you don't have this problem of poverty amid plenty, and technology advances, and the people of China keep getting wealthier because profits are not in command. And so it was out of 20th century socialism, Stalinism, really existing socialism, you got socialism with Chinese characteristics, 21st century socialism. And if you go around the world to countries that have broken out of imperialism, they have adopted this new economic system, right? And even, in Iran, they call it not capitalism, but Islam, but it's the same system. They have 5-year plans. They have state-run industries. The government facilitates and subsidizes private businesses that are in line with the national vision. It's the same system, right? It's done in the name of Islam. It's done on a religious basis rather than the name of Marxism, but it's the same system. Bolivarianism in Latin America, it's rooted in Marxism, but it also has elements of Christianity and elements of Native American and indigenous culture. It's the same system. In Venezuela and in Nicaragua, it's the same system. 21st century socialism is the new model where countries break out of the domination of the Western imperialists, and with central planning, they build themselves up and they facilitate capitalists, right, that are in the interest of the project of defeating imperialism. This is the new model that exists, and it's highly successful. It's highly successful, and it's an advance. And this is what you need to understand. Now, we're in a completely new era, okay? And in this completely new era, if you're organizing a Marxist-Leninist organization to fight the imperialists, and you're trying to create 20th century socialism, Stalinism, you're behind. You're way behind. We're living in a different time. We're living in the imperialist centers in an era where it used to be the imperialist centers were stabilizing. Now the imperialist centers are being cannibalized from within. We're seeing the breakdown of capitalism in this new stage called destructive accumulation. Meanwhile, around the world, countries are developing not with Marxism, Leninism, Soviet-style communism, but with 21st century socialism. Socialism with Chinese characteristics, not capitalism, but Islam, Bolivarianism. We're in a completely new situation. And if you're doing the communism thing, you're doing Marx in 1917, right? When Bolshevism was the new phase. We're in a new stage. And this new stage that we're in requires a new type of organization and a new type of movement. And one thing about 21st century socialism is that it encourages creativity. In Nicaragua, I have been to Nicaragua. I actually had a conversation with the president's son, Loreno Ortega, the president of Nicaragua. His son met with me, and we had a conversation. And in that conversation, we talked about the Nicaraguan economy. And in Nicaragua, they have micro entrepreneurs, a micro entrepreneurship program where the government finds people and helps them start their own business. They're capitalists, but they're aligned with the overall socialist economy. And if you have a government that is investing in the population, helping people find their talent and open their own business, right? That's not the old Soviet model of everything being run by the state, but it's not capitalism either, right? It's a planned economy that utilizes individual initiative, right? And the reason that I'm doing this stream is because I continue to see people that just don't understand what we're doing, right? They just don't get it. This is somebody trying to explain my views. I'm not even going to tell you where this is from. You can probably figure it out. Since late 2024, Maupin has started openly distancing himself in CPI from Marxism and communism altogether. Instead, Maupin has used the term innovationism to describe their tendency. He denounced opposition to capitalism, erroneously trying to separate it from imperialism, kind of like Lenin, kind of like the Bolsheviks at the Baku Congress, kind of like in Nicaragua, how they're promoting capitalism as part of their socialism, kind of like China with socialism. He's so dumb, he doesn't realize that capitalism is different than socialism. And he expressed support for Donald Trump after his victory in 2024. These people are looking at this. They don't understand what we're doing because they don't understand that this is the world we're living in. And yeah, we're not going around and saying that, oh yes, the capitalist and the worker, it's unfair, form a labor union so the worker can seize his factory. They don't have factories anymore. We're moving toward an economy where everyone is a contractor, a gig economy where people are Uber drivers. We're moving toward an economy where everyone is an individual contractor. And the idea that we're going to form labor unions and those labor unions are going to fight the bosses, that's just not where the struggle is at. That's what Kshama Sawant thinks. That's what other people think, and they're wrong. We're moving toward an economy where everyone is going to be a micro entrepreneur. So what we need is a government of action that will fight for working families and invest in communities so that everyone can be a strong entrepreneur. A government that will break the power of the imperialists and the big monopolies and invest in communities and enable people to become prosperous innovators with state support. We need a government that invests in people, not prisons and bombs and tanks and destruction. We need a government of action that invests in working families and fights for working families. Populism. You cannot build this class movement in our time. It's not going to work. And on top of that, you can't organize as if we're just having a classic imperialism era either. We're in a new stage. We're in the stage of destructive accumulation, and we're in the stage of 21st century socialism. And in America, the movement against imperialism amid the Western countries that are collapsing into destructive accumulation, that are heading toward depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery, war, unlimited war. The movement that we are building in the United States is called innovationism. And the reason we have to call it something different is because it's different. The Bolsheviks didn't call themselves social democrats. When Lenin came back from Russia, came back from exile, came to Russia in April 1917, he said, we have to change our name. We're now the Communist Party. We're not the Social Democratic Party anymore because the Social Democrats are doing something different than what we're doing. They're organizing the workers against their employers. They supported the war in World War I. We're against it. And so we have to be the Communist Party so that we don't get confused with the Social Democrats. And the Bolsheviks were known as the Bolsheviks or the Communist Party so that nobody thought that they were the Marxists. Well, in our time, we have to be separate from the communists. The communists are fighting a war about all kinds of different things. But I'll give you another example. Christianity. Christianity started out as an interpretation of Judaism. Did you know that? It actually started out as an interpretation of Judaism. Jesus Christ was a Jew, and he was living in Palestine and in Jerusalem. He taught in the temple, just like all the Pharisees and scribes and Sanhedrin and all the other religious groups. But he had a very, very, very different interpretation. But he considered himself to be the true inheritor of Moses and Abraham, and he had the true interpretation. He considered the other Jews, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, the scribes, to be sellouts and phonies. And the other Jews hated him so much that they conspired with the Romans and had him put to death. And after the death of Jesus Christ, he appeared to his followers and he told them, go and make disciples of all nations. Little known fact, Judaism does not recruit. Judaism does not recruit. They don't go around converting people to Judaism. In order to become a Jew, you have to ask 3 times, and it's quite a difficult process. But Jesus said, we're going to go around converting the whole world. We're going to go make disciples of all nations. The Great Commission, it was called. Jesus also, he rejected legalism. Judaism at that time was founded on legalism. Jews follow a very strict list of rules, at least they did back then. And one of those rules was the Sabbath. You're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath. And Jesus, he came along and he was healing people on the Sabbath. And they said to Jesus, how can you be healing people on the Sabbath? And he turned to them and he said, the Sabbath was made for man. Man was not made for the Sabbath. And on top of that, at one point, they got Jesus and they said to him, which of the 10 commandments is the most important? Because in Judaism, the 10 commandments is one of the most important things, the 10 commandments. And so they were trying to trick him so that he would name one of the commandments as being better than the others, and they could get him in trouble for that. They said, which of the 10 commandments is the most important? And he said, the 2 greatest commandments are to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And he said, and all the other commandments and all the teachings of Judaism rest on that principle. He said, it's more important to love God with your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And the 10 commandments are just kind of ways to do that, right? If you love your neighbor as yourself, you're not going to kill him. You're not going to steal from him. If you love God, you're going to honor the Sabbath and go to church. And he says, basically, yeah, he says, what's important is how you feel. Loving God and loving your neighbor is what's important, not following these 10 rules that you guys made up. So he rejected legalism, which was a very important premise of the Jewish religion. And so after the death of Jesus, the Apostle Paul is going around building a religion, and their religion has a little bit of a problem, because in order to become a Jew, you have to get circumcised, right? You have to get circumcised if you're a man, and that's a rather unpleasant thing to do. A lot of people, maybe they were going to convert to the religion, and then they found out, we're going to have to get circumcised, and they're like, we don't want to do that. And Paul says, you know what? Circumcision is kind of like the Sabbath. It's kind of like, it's not that important. And he says you can become circumcised in the spirit. You don't have to actually get physically circumcised. You can become spiritually circumcised. And so at this point, you've got this group of people that say, yes, we're the true interpreters of Moses. We're the true interpreters of Abraham, but we don't honor the Sabbath. And, we don't think the 10 commandments are important. And we go around recruiting people, and we don't believe in circumcision. And at that point, people started calling them Christians. And that was actually a slur that was invented by the other Jews. The other Jews said, you're not a real Jew. What you are is you're a Christian. You're following Christ. You're not a real Jew. And eventually they adopted that and they said, you know what? We're something different. You guys don't believe in converting people. We do. You guys have, and they were something different. Just like the Bolsheviks said, we're not Marxists anymore. We're not social democrats. We're communists. In the same way, the Christians said, you know what? We're not Jews anymore. We're Christians. It had entered a new stage. And I am here to tell you that the reason we're not communists anymore is because we're in a new stage. We are in a new stage. We are not in the era of imperialism anymore. We're in the era of destructive accumulation, where imperialism is collapsing in and of itself. We are entering barbarism, constant unending wars, and we're moving toward the fall of Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, and a great cemetery in the Western countries. We can see that all around us. And as a result, we have to develop a new type of organization to build a new type of economy. We have to build innovationism, right? That's what we have to do, right? We have to build a new type of movement. So we're not trying to build the Soviet Union, number one. We're not living in the era of classical imperialism. We're living in the era of destructive accumulation. We're definitely not living in the era of industrialization. We're building a new movement in a new time, and we have new methods. Number one, we are pioneering a new type of organization. If it was just a matter of building a classical Marxist-Leninist party, somebody would have done that by now and had success. It's not going to work. And we have broken with dialectical materialism. This philosophy that says there is no God, comes out of the French Revolution, right? They see the church as an oppressive institution of the state. They're overthrowing feudalism, so they say there is no God. All there is matter, but that matter is constantly fighting. And the way we get things is we fight and we rebel, and we have the red flag, and we're all about vengeance and tearing things down and tearing things apart. That ideology is toxic. And Bolshevism was the first step in breaking with that ideology. And really existing socialism, when it came into existence, was a step away from that. Stalin brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. Stalin was trained in a seminary, and Stalin and Trotsky parted ways. Trotsky believed in the permanent revolution, and Stalin believed in socialism in one country. And Stalin was the very beginning of socialism moving away from the left. As you see here, Marxism started out as a form of leftism. And out of Marxism came Bolshevism. And out of Bolshevism came really existing socialism or Stalinism. And Stalinism was a break with leftism. Stalinism was conservative. Stalin glorified the family, the mother, the father, and the kids. Stalin gave a medal to women who had more than 10 children. Gave birth to more than 10 children, you got a special medal. You're a mother of the Soviet Union. Stalin outlawed abortion. Stalin outlawed homosexuality. Stalin promoted loyalty to the homeland. During World War II, Stalin made films glorifying Ivan the Terrible and Alexander Nevsky and the great czars of Russia. Stalin promoted national loyalty to the Soviet Union, and he built the Soviet Union as a civilization state, not a nation state, but a civilization state, much like China, much like America, right? In the era of classical capitalism, you had the nation state, Britain, France, Germany. But now we live in the era of civilization states, states that are multinational, but are based on an aspirational idea. Russia, the concept of the Great Russia. There's many different nationalities in Russia. But the idea of Russia that Putin incarnates, the great nation, the Russian Orthodox Church, the vision that's been around for thousands of years that goes back further than the Soviet Union. Russia, great Russia, right? That is a civilization state. China, there are many different nationalities in China. You've got Uyghurs, you've got Tibetans, but China is a civilization based on an idea. Based on an idea, an understanding, the great civilization, Confucianism, the great relationships. It's a civilization state. America can be a great civilization state if we can break out of imperialism, if we can break out of the rule of the big bankers and the monopolies, and if we can create a government that invests in people, we can become a prosperous, powerful civilization state that doesn't colonize and exploit other people, but builds up the world based on win-win cooperation. We can build a prosperous civilization state in America. We can do it, and it will be based on an idea. Russia is based on an idea. China is based on an idea. America can be based on an idea. And what is that idea? It's the idea that human beings are creative creatures, that we can work hard and build and advance our conditions. It's the idea that we can build a better world. And if we believe in what we are doing, and if we strive and we work hard and we sacrifice, we can build a new world. That's what built this country. America, in the minds of people all over the world, has become the land of work hard and achieve your dreams. And in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Anna Louise Strong, one of my most favorite writers, she went to the Soviet Union, and she looked back at America where people were starving and homeless during the Great Depression, and she said, the Soviet Union is the new America. And she said, communism is nothing but 20th century Americanism, because America was falling apart, but the Soviet Union was building, and building is American in her mind. And right now, many people go to China and they say, China seems like America, because in China, the government's building and they're mobilizing and people are investing and people are having new ideas. China seems like the new America. The only way that the American spirit, what people consider Americanism, working hard, achieving your dreams, being creative, engineer, the only way Americanism can be preserved is for America to have a government that invests in the population and creates innovationism. The essence of 21st century socialism is that you have a government that rationally organizes the means of production and the economy, enabled to unleash human creativity, right? That's what the micro-entrepreneurship program of Nicaragua, that's what socialism with Chinese characteristics, that's what the market socialist economy of Vietnam is about, that's what not capitalism but Islam is about in Iran, that's what Bolivarianism is about, and that's what innovationism is about in America. We are building a new movement. And in order to have a movement that really celebrates human creativity, we have to acknowledge that human creativity has a spiritual side. No other species has done what mankind has done. No other species is reinventing its relationship with nature. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years, and beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But in just 8,000 years, we've gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones. We have done amazing things as a species. And if you just say, well, that's just natural, Caleb, we just evolved this thing called a brain, and it has this, we evolved this creative ability. No, we didn't. No, we didn't. There is something divine. You have a soul. God is the creator of all things, and you have a spark of godly creative power within you. And that, I don't want you to follow some corrupt church, and I don't want you to follow some pope, and I don't want you to follow some authoritarian regime that's imposing religion on you. I want you to embrace the godlike creative ability within your own soul. I want you to study Wallace Wattles. I want you to study the science of being great and the science of getting rich. I want you to embrace your own creative energy and the notion that there is no limit to growth and that human beings can build and expand and create beyond anything. And that will be the basis upon which socialism comes into the world, and which we break America out of imperialism and build a prosperous civilization state. This is a new movement. And it's not communism. It's not Soviet-style communism. I'm not sitting here telling you that dialectical materialism is the way to go and that we got to form a vanguard party of the worker, and the worker will rise up against the capitalist and we will nationalize everything and redistribute the wealth. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a state that cultivates and unleashes human creativity, and an economy that is organized to unleash abundance. We need a prosperous civilization state, and we need to break out of globalism, imperialism. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need popular power. That's what I'm seeing here saying, and that is not communist. And I'm not pretending it's communist. I haven't sold out my anti-imperialism. I've studied what they did in China. I've studied the way things are in Russia. I've studied the way things are in Iran. I've studied the way things are in Venezuela. I'm not mechanically applying a bunch of old Soviet textbooks to understand it. I've actually understood what has made Nicaragua prosperous. I've talked with Lorena Ortega, the son of Daniel Ortega. You can watch the video of our conversation. It's posted here on the channel. I have interacted with Russian President Putin. I have sat down with Ibrahim Riazi, the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I have been in the room with these people. I know what is happening in the BRICS world. And I'm saying that America can be part of this if we have a government that is no longer tied in with the satanic cabal of international bankers that are trying to hold back human progress and grind us into poverty and march us toward World War III. I'm saying if we can reject the emerging low-wage police state, if we can reject their sinister schemes to try and grind the wheels of history backwards, if we can reject that and we can take control of America, we can build a prosperous civilization state, and we will not build it on the basis of jealousy and class resentment, and we're not going to build it on the basis of the factory worker rising up against, the factory owner, and we're not going to build it on the basis of dialectical materialism. We're going to build it on the basis of love, creativity, and innovation and celebration of the human spirit. That is how this movement will be built, and if we're going to build this movement, we must go in a new direction. That is what I'm saying. And we are pioneering a whole new way of understanding things. Our book on Khrushchevism, we understand the psychological operations, how they manipulate our Oedipal and libidinal complexes and maneuver us away from having the love and connection and discipline that comes with being in an organization. We know the games that they play, how they've destroyed revolutionary movements, how Khrushchev's secret speech destroyed and demoralized the global communist movement. We know what they do, the games that they play, and we are engineering new methods of solidifying a new organization. We're doing it. And we are understanding how spiritual connections and the glow of optimism that people get by working together as brothers and sisters, we're understanding how that can be created and cultivated. We're doing it. And we're looking at the Uhuru movement and how they have basically launched their own micro-entrepreneurship program in the Black community, launching programs, a program for pregnant mothers, a farmer's market. They're doing kind of what Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua is doing with his micro-entrepreneurship program, having their members innovate and be creative. We're way ahead of the game. And this movement we are creating is not old school communism, but it's not selling out our principles either. We are moving toward a new stage. And that new stage is called innovationism. And it's a really, really, really exciting movement. And if we were to call it communism, we would be doing it a great disservice because it ain't. And no, we haven't just given it a new name. It's not the same old stuff with a new name, new label slapped on it. No, this is something new. But it reflects where the BRICS countries are at, and it reflects what the nature of the new economy is. And this is not simple stuff. This isn't stuff that, I've been on here explaining this for 1 hour and 46 minutes, and that's okay. Because this stuff needs to be explained. It is not simple. We are in a new era. We are in a new crisis. We're building a new type of organization. We are the pioneers. And if you are still doing the communism thing, you're going to get left behind. And if you think that what we're doing is just Soviet-style communism, we're just rebranding, this is just, CPUSA 3.0 or whatever, then you're also delusional. We are doing something completely different, something that gives off a new spiritual vibe, something that we are doing something amazing. It's amazingly exciting. And we are blazing new trail. We're doing what has never been done before. Long live innovationism. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. And I would like people to really understand the beauty of our project. Innovationism is a totally new stage. And we've taken the best of Marxism and preserved it. And we're leaving the rest behind. And if you read my book, I wrote a book, to the Marxists, where I laid this out. It was like basically a message to the Marxists. And I laid all of this out. And into the Marxists, I showed that there are certain principles that classical Marxism-Leninism stood for that people calling themselves communists don't even believe in. One of the most basic principles of classic Marxism-Leninism is that you want to create a planned economy. You want the banks, factories, and industries to be rationally organized to overcome the tendency of the falling rate of profit and the problem of overproduction. I got news for you. The overwhelming majority of people in Western countries who call themselves communists don't want that. I don't know what they want. They want worker cooperatives. They want a government that, that punishes white people for their privilege, or they want a government that is promoting feminism and LGBT. I don't know what they want, but they don't want a planned economy. They don't want to overcome the irrationality and the anarchy of production and organized production in order to have unlimited growth. They don't want that. These people have never heard of the tendency of the falling rate of profit. They've never heard of the value crisis, the glut, the problem of overproduction. In fact, what they think is wrong with capitalism is that it just wants more and more and more, and that's bad for the environment, right? Another point of classical Marxism, Leninism is when people are under attack from the imperialists, you always support them, no matter what. You always stand with the people that are under the attack of the imperialists. These people don't do that. They don't support any of the countries that are under attack by the imperialists. They can't even support the Uhuru movement when they're under attack by the imperialists. They can't even support the other socialists when they're under attack from the imperialists. Right? The communist movement in the West has become so bankrupt. But it's become bankrupt because it's not based on how the world currently is. They are trying to apply principles from the time that Marx was alive, or in some cases, the times when Lenin was alive, to the time in which we live now. And things are different now, right? Like I said, if your idea is you're going to build a labor movement of workers forming unions. Why have they not been able to successfully unionize Uber? Why? Because every Uber driver competes with every other Uber driver for jobs. And he can work anytime he wants. He just turns the app on. And every Uber driver thinks of himself as an innovative capitalist. I am the Uber driver, and I'm maneuvering to get the best hours, the best drives, the best tips. And if you think that you're going to form class solidarity among the Uber drivers, you're delusional. What you need to do is form community solidarity for the neighborhood that the Uber driver lives in, where he's loyal to the people on his block, he's loyal to the people on his street, and he considers himself part of a movement to build a strong, prosperous civilization state in his country. You need populism. But if you think you're going to get the Uber drivers to stand in solidarity against the Uber owner, that's just not how these things work. The Uber driver thinks he's a capitalist. You ever get in an Uber, right? A lot of them have like candy machines that you put money in. A lot of them have little games. They want to charge you money to play on the Uber. They think they're capitalists. Their mindset is, I am a capitalist. I am an innovator. I am a capitalist. And if we don't get hip to the fact that this is the direction things are going, that the economy is moving toward a gig economy where workers are mini capitalists and are treated as mini capitalists, if we don't get hip to that and start organizing a populist movement to fight for the entire community, we're going to be left behind. Why do you think Javier Milei won the Argentine elections? It was because of the fact that Argentine law protects factory workers but doesn't protect Uber drivers, punishes Uber drivers. And he said, Uber drivers, you're a capitalist. You're a capitalist. And he pitched them his libertarian ideology. And if we don't get hip to the fact that we're not going to build a factory worker versus factory owner movement, that we're going to have to build a movement that encourages and will boost the creativity and individual initiative of gig economy workers, and we'll have a state that fights for them and their communities and their families against the big monopolies. If we don't build a movement like that, we're wasting our time. And this is revolutionary analysis. And I am able to make this analysis because I've been there. There's a reason that Putin talked to me and I was given the opportunity to speak directly to the Russian president. There's a reason that I have sat down with the president of Iran. There's a reason that I've sat down with Alexander Dugin. There's a reason that I've sat down I stood up really with Loreno Ortega, the son of Daniel Ortega. There's a reason that I've traveled all around the world. I am only 38 years old. I'm actually 37. I'm going to be 38 pretty soon. I'm only 37 years old. And I have been to so many countries and I have studied this and my writings. There's a reason that my book, Where is America Going? This book that I wrote, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. That book is now available in Chinese. And leading Chinese social media personalities have promoted it and they've translated my book Where is America going? That's, a proto-innovationist text about divisions in the ruling class and Bonapartism. There's a reason that's available in Chinese, right? Somebody else might be famous on the internet and somebody else might be sexier on social media, but I'm the guy. I'm the one. I am the new anti-imperialist movement. I am the person that is going to define this epoch, at least in America, right? It is my analysis that will define anti-imperialism and the anti-imperialist movement that is to come in America. No one else can do it. They can copy our ideas if they want. They can mimic us. They can shit talk us. They can, run stupid Khrushchevist narratives about cults or whatever they want to do. It's me who's going to do it. And also, one of the saddest things I have seen in my life is I've seen it over and over. When Cecily McMillan, shout out to Cecily, great woman, I very heroic activist from Occupy Wall Street, my friend. When she went to jail, I was involved in her defense. There were a lot of old leftist activists who were involved in her defense. And they said, oh, when she gets out, she is going to be the leader. She is going to be the leader that we need, because mainstream media was talking about her case. She was a socialist, etc. Well, she got out of jail and she wasn't the leader that we needed. That wasn't what she wanted to do, and that wasn't where she was at. And an even sadder thing was AOC. I met AOC before she was AOC, when she was Ocasio, right? Before they even started calling her AOC, I met AOC. There's a picture of me and AOC before she was AOC. And when AOC got elected, so many old people were piling into her town halls saying, oh my God, she's going to be it. She's going to be an American George Galloway. She is going to be, and no, she wasn't. No, she was not. She was not that. And there's so many people that are saying, when is the leader going to come? When is the leader going to come? I got news for you people. He's right here. Take it or leave it. I'm not begging you to join me. I'm not pandering. I'm not going to stand on my head and do tricks for you. I'm right here. And you can get on this train and come along with me or not. But I ain't waiting for you. The leader that we need, the only person who can build an anti-imperialist movement in this time, the only person who can organize the kind of movement we need, the only person who is pioneering, who understands the current situation, who understands the breakdown of capitalism in our time, who understands innovationism and the kind of movement we need to build in the new era of the gig economy, the only person who understands the direction that things are going and the rising BRICS economy, it's me. I am the linchpin. I am what connects America to the BRICS economy. I am the one who's been raising the Bering Sea Bridge and saying that we need to connect over the Bering Sea. Our organization, we are the only people out there in the streets marching, saying that we need to build the Bering Sea Bridge, celebrating Trump's meeting with Putin in Alaska. Our organization, we're the only people marching through the streets with a banner that says only peace can make America great again, and had Trump shaking hands. I'm the one who wrote the book with the psychoanalysis of Kamala Harris, the book that they banned from Amazon that went viral and exploded in popularity after they banned it, the book that was on every channel that thousands of people purchased during the 2024 election with the psychoanalysis of Kamala Harris, understanding how she had been programmed to be destructive and march us into World War III. I'm the one who wrote it. I'm the one. It's me. I'm the one who wrote the book that's just been translated into Chinese, that millions of Chinese people are learning about Marxism in our era from. I'm the one. I'm the one. And, I apologize if you think I sound arrogant. I'm not here to tell you that I'm great or tell you that I'm so important and all of that. I'm here to tell you that I'm the one. And I'm here to do you a favor by letting you know that you can either get on board with what we're doing or you can be left behind. But if you think that look, the era of me being modest is over. Yeah, the new years of lead. Who talked about the years of lead? All these clowns on the internet were praising Luigi. Oh, we love Luigi. And I said, they're going to try to start a new years of lead. And now they're all talking about a years of lead. I wrote the book, The Danger of an American Years of Lead, long before Charlie Kirk had ever been assassinated. When people hadn't even imagined that Charlie Kirk could get shot, I wrote a book last December, The Danger of the American Years of Lead. Here we are. I'm the one. It's me, folks. I didn't pick this. I didn't decide I am going to be the one. This is just how it happened. This is just how it happened. I had to be the one. And for a long time, I was modest. And for a long time, I was humble. And for a long time, I didn't boost my own horn. I'm done doing that. I'm done. I'm really done. I'm done. Because if I was not the one, they would not be trying to bring me down in the way that they have tried to bring me down. They know I'm the one. They know it, right? And the way they have gone after me is nothing short of ridiculous, right? And the efforts they have made to try and suppress me, they know I'm the one. And I didn't want to be the one, right? And there's a lot of people who think they're the one, right? And maybe, it's funny. When I was 19, I was just like every other young communist man. I thought I was the next Lenin. I thought I was the next, I was going to be the leader of the party and all of that. And I got humbled very quickly. And I learned to submit to an organization. As much as, honestly, that organization was not worthy of my submission, I learned to submit. I learned to submit. And I'll be honest, I was a young man full of arrogance, full of ego. I graduated, I finished college, and I was struggling, and I sold my blood plasma, and I went for days without food, and I moved to New York City, and I struggled. And I built a shrine to William Z. Foster in my apartment. And I went all in, and I submitted. And I thought I was going to live the rest of my life in poverty. I thought I was going to live the rest of my life renting a basement and barely making any money, but I was committed to what I believed. And then I got invited to go on a Red Crescent mission to Iran to deliver medical aid to Yemen. And I got on that ship, and I found out that the Israeli government was saying we were smuggling weapons and they might bomb the ship. And I found out the Saudis were also saying that we were smuggling weapons, that we were going to bomb the ship. And I saw the press reports and Reuters saying we were escorted by Iranian warships, which I didn't see any Iranian warships. I don't know how that works, and I saw all of that, and I thought I might die. And I was okay with that. I was willing to accept it. And I connected with God on a higher plane, and I made a spiritual connection, and I experienced something. I experienced something, and I gave myself over to something bigger than myself. And that is the only thing that enables me to stand before you today and keep doing what I am doing. Right? And sure, yeah, when I was 19, when I was 18, I thought I was the one. And so does every 19-year-old young man who joins a communist group, who has a dictator fantasy, who's got Oedipal issues with his father and all of that, right? And if I was still doing that, you would have every right to not listen to me. But I'm telling you, I struggled with reality. I was broken. And I submitted first to the reality, first to the movement. I gave myself completely to the movement. And I broke with a lot, and I learned a lot. And then I found on the other side of that, I found something beautiful. And that is why I am still here today. And that is what enables me to come before you and say, look, I'm the one. I'm doing it. History has chosen me, as John said, and you can join or not. That's what enables me to do that. And I don't care, right? And I don't care. And that's the thing. I don't think, for a while, every time I did anything, they would start making fun of it on the internet. Now they don't do that anymore. Now they've realized I'm not going to go away because they do that. So now they just don't talk about me anymore. They try to pretend I don't exist. Fine. But at this point, I don't care. And at this point, I can tell you, I'm doing it and no one else is. And that, I don't need to be modest. I don't need to pretend that I'm not who I am. I don't need to pretend that I am not assigned a very important role by history. I don't need to pretend that I'm in the same league as some streamer bro. I just need to come out and say, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm offering. This is what I've accomplished. And this is what we're trying to do. And if you want it, take it. And if you don't want it, don't take it, right? I can be whoever you want me to be. I can be somebody who you listen to as you go to sleep at night on YouTube. I can be somebody who helps you join a movement where you learn to work with other people for a goal you can believe in. I can be somebody who writes books that entertain you. I can be somebody who builds an organization where you feel at home. I can be somebody who leads you to live an entirely new life. Take me or leave me. I can be whoever you want me to be. That's what I am. That's what I am, and I am here to be who you want me to be and who you need me to be. And that's it. And I'm me, and I'm here, and I am on a mission. And I am not giving up this mission. I am not backing down. I have a particular purpose, and if I was capable of doing something else, I would have. If there was another path, another choice opened up for me, I would have taken that choice. And that's why I don't think I'm particularly heroic for doing this, actually, to be honest. If I could do something else, I probably would, but I can't. So that doesn't mean I'm some great heroic person for doing this. No, I'm doing it because I have to. And that's why I'm here night after night after night. And they have predicted my downfall. They have predicted my disappearance so many times, and here I am. Here I am, here I am, here I am. And I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. And our movement is doing great things right now. We are marching ahead. We are marching ahead, and we have something very, very, very special to offer. We have something very, very special to offer. We're pioneering something completely new. And I'm really excited about what we're doing. And I'm happy to share it with all of you.